The forest was breathing. Not literally, at least she hoped, but every exhale of wind through the high pines felt like inhaled breath pressing against her back. The fading light spilled across the moss-strewn trail in thin, slanted ribbons, and for the first time, Mia noticed how quiet it had become. Too quiet. The usual chorus of rustling leaves, distant woodpeckers, and birdsong had fallen away into a soft, waiting hush. She stopped, tugging her jacket closer around her shoulders. Her companions, Daniel and Jonas, were a few paces ahead, tracing the narrow dirt path that curled through the forest like a dark ribbon. Their footsteps made little sound, as if the earth itself were swallowing it. Then, she saw it. A trail marker, freshly hammered into a gnarled birch. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. A small wooden plaque, the kind hikers used for reassurance. But the painted arrow had dissolved into something else. Instead of pointing, a jagged spiral twisted upon itself, dark as the wet bark beneath it. Mia blinked. The spiral shifted, or maybe her eyes played tricks. The lines throbbed faintly, as though alive, and a sudden vertigo struck her. "Hey!" she called, voice-catching. Did the marker change? Daniel glanced back, brushing a strand of sweat-matted hair from his face. "It's just a weird branch shadow, I think." He waved and returned his gaze to the trail. Jonas, slower and more careful in his steps, finally squinted at the plaque. "It's not a branch," he said. His tone held an uncharacteristic edge, tight and uncertain. Look at the pattern. Doesn't this remind you of something?" Mia leaned closer, inhaling the damp, acidic scent of the forest floor. The symbol felt old. Too old. Lines that should have been straight quivered slightly. The corners of the jagged spiral seemed to melt when she looked away, then snap back when she refocused. Her stomach sank. The forest felt different here, unbalanced, as if it were watching. "Maybe someone's messing with us?" Daniel said, trying to laugh, but it came out hollow, swallowed by the pines. Jonas shook his head. "This isn't vandalism. No one's even been on this trail for weeks. And look at the others." He pointed further down the trail, and Mia realized she hadn't noticed the previous markers. Now they were all there, nailed to trees, faintly glowing in the dim light. But none bore arrows. Each held a symbol more disturbing than the last. Jagged triangles, concentric circles with serrated edges, something that almost, but not quite, resembled a human eye. She tried to memorize one, and the next instant, its edges seemed to rearrange themselves, stretching impossibly along the bark. A wind rose suddenly, rattling the canopy. The hollow whistle of air between trunks sounded like whispers, fragments of voices just out of reach. Mia shivered, tightening her grip on her backpack straps. "Do you feel watched?" she asked. Daniel glanced around nervously, something he rarely did. "Yeah, I thought it was just the shadows. But it feels different here." The silence deepened. No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Just the muffled thrum of distant, unseen life. Every crack of a twig underfoot sounded like it echoed a mile, and every rustle in the undergrowth made her jump. They pressed on. Each symbol seemed to pull them deeper, twisting the trail into curves that contradicted memory. Mia had walked this section countless times before, yet the path felt wrong. Slopes were steeper, roots more aggressive, and the air colder, clinging to skin and lungs. She began to doubt her recollection of the forest. Did we turn left here last time? Or right? Jonas stopped suddenly. Look, another marker. This one was carved into a birch so pale it almost glowed. The symbol made her stomach twist. A lattice of interlocking diamond shapes, the lines jagged enough to feel like fingernails scraping bone. The pattern seemed to pulse, faintly, and a low hum filled her ears. Not mechanical, not like an animal, just a resonance in the air that pressed against her skull. "I don't like this," Mia whispered. Her hands trembled. They're not showing us the trail. They're guiding us somewhere." Daniel frowned. "It's a trail, though. We follow markers too." His words faltered. He swallowed, unease written across his face. We follow markers to a destination. But which one? The question made her chest tighten. Every symbol felt like a statement, a promise, or a threat. They weren't arbitrary. They were deliberate, pointing not in space but into something else. Something beneath the surface of their understanding. By now, the forest was nearly dark. Mia could barely make out the silhouettes of the trees, and shadows pooled unnaturally along the trail. The symbols seemed brighter in contrast, almost luminescent, guiding them like malevolent lanterns. Jonas's voice cracked. It's like the forest itself is moving or rearranging around us. Look at the trail. It's not the same trail. Mia's heart thudded. Every tree looked wrong. Angles subtly off, bark textures exaggerated, roots writhing as though they had their own will. She realized they had crossed into a part of the forest that should not exist, or at least not in this configuration. The world had folded around the symbols. She stopped abruptly. Ahead, the final marker gleamed even in the twilight. It was unlike anything she'd seen. A complex, impossible knot of lines that coiled into itself, a spiral that became a labyrinth, a lattice of jagged crescents and eyes, shifting as she stared. Her vision wavered. Then a sound. Low. At first she thought it was her own breath, but the sound repeated, "Th," like a distorted owl or some creature bending the rules of nature. The sound moved, circling them, echoing through the invisible walls of the forest. Daniel broke the silence. I don't think we should go further." But Jonas's eyes were locked on the final marker. He muttered something that froze her blood. "It's showing us, me. Look. It's me inside the pattern." Mia turned, trying to see what he meant. The symbol quivered, lines twisting into a vague human silhouette, arms and head warped, familiar and grotesque. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the lattice of jagged crescents. "We need to go back," she said. Her voice was urgent, raw. But the trail behind them was no longer recognizable. The markers behind twisted into shapes that refused her memory. Trees were misplaced, and every familiar landmark was gone. The wind fell silent. Even the distorted calls stopped. It was as if the forest held its breath. A faint light glimmered in the distance. Another marker? A clearing? She couldn't tell. And then a new dread settled over her. The realization that these symbols were not just guiding them, they were choosing them. Her feet moved almost involuntarily, following the trembling pull of the final marker. She didn't notice the time passing. The forest seemed endless, but not in a natural way. Endless in a designed, patient way, like a trap crafted over eons. And then she saw it. A figure at the far edge of the light, pale and thin, limbs distorted, almost blending with the shadows. It mirrored her movements perfectly. She gasped, stepping back, and the trail itself seemed to respond. The symbol shifted, twisting again, and the forest contracted subtly around them, guiding them forward. Jonas's hand gripped her arm. "Do you see it?" She did, and then it vanished. The last thing Mia remembered was the symbol pulsing in the dim light, lines stretching into infinity. She reached toward it instinctively, and the world shivered beneath her feet. She heard Daniel call her name. Sharp, panicked, but the voice felt distant, hollow, like a memory. Somewhere ahead, the forest waited, patient, and the symbols continued their endless, shifting dance. They were not lost exactly. They were led, and the forest was not done with them. The forest was impossibly still. Even the usual hum of insects had fallen away, leaving only the occasional sigh of wind through the pines. Sam and Leah had pitched their tent in a small clearing near the edge of the ridge, far enough from the trail to feel secluded but close enough to keep a faint view of the stars breaking through the trees. They huddled near the dying embers of a campfire, the warmth failing against the chill that seeped into their jackets and gloves. "I swear I saw it move," Leah whispered, poking at a log with the fire stick, sending a brief shower of sparks into the night air. "The zipper." Sam raised an eyebrow, trying to keep his voice steady. even as a thin tremor ran through his hands. It's probably just the wind. The tent's nylon is loose, the poles shift. I'll check it again before we sleep. He crouched beside the tent and tugged the zipper fully closed, making sure the small plastic tab clicked into its little lock. The metallic click echoed faintly in the quiet, oddly loud in the absence of other sound. He tested the tension of the fabric, pressing a hand against the taut wall. Nothing moved. No draft, no hint of disturbance. "Good," he said. "Lock tight. We'll sleep well." Leah didn't respond. She stared past him into the darkness, the flashlight beam wavering as her fingers tightened around it. Shadows shifted among the tree trunks, long and angular, stretched by the moonlight. She swallowed, forcing down the unease that had been crawling at the edges of her nerves all evening. They retreated into the tent an hour later, the fire reduced to glowing embers, and zipped it closed behind them. The night had cooled sharply, and even inside the tent, the air felt damp and biting. Sam reached for his sleeping bag, rubbing his hands together, and Leah clutched her blanket, drawing it around her shoulders. "You sure you locked it?" she asked, voice small. "Yes," he said. "I even pressed the tab. Solid. You'll see." They lay down, the tent's nylon stretched over their bodies, taut but soft under the weight of their limbs. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing branches against each other with a hollow, distant scrape. Could have been anything, Sam thought. A bird settling, a branch falling. But then, click. Leah stiffened. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakably metallic. She turned her head toward the zipper. It had moved, just a fraction, a tiny slack in the teeth. She didn't breathe. Sam didn't notice yet, his hand fumbling in the dark for a flashlight. I thought I heard something," she said finally. "What?" Sam murmured, shining the light across the tent interior. The nylon wall rippled slightly, catching the beam. He frowned and touched the zipper. It was partially unlatched. "I locked it," he whispered, more to himself than to her. He tugged it closed, hearing the click, and pressed the tab. The tension of the nylon under his fingers felt firm. But as he leaned back, exhausted, the click returned. The zipper had inched open again. Leah's eyes were wide. "You saw that, right? It's moving." Maybe it's the wind," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Outside, the trees were rigid and silent. No gusts disturbed the branches. No sounds of animals. Just the unnatural stillness, as if the forest itself were holding its breath. They lay awake for hours, the zipper sliding open and closed at intervals, each movement accompanied by the faintest metallic whisper. Sometimes it paused for long stretches. Then, in the darkest moments between sleep, it would slip forward again as if probing. Sam tried ignoring it, telling himself it was his imagination, the fabric relaxing, gravity working on the teeth. Leah didn't try to sleep at all. She clutched the blanket and shone the flashlight across the tent, watching the shadowed creases in the nylon. By midnight, the zipper was moving more deliberately. The slack grew and shrank, a rhythm almost hypnotic. It wasn't random, Sam realized. It wasn't wind or material fatigue. Whoever or whatever was doing this, they understood the mechanism. The pull and release were intentional. Leah's voice was barely a whisper. "It's testing us, like it's seeing if we notice." Sam couldn't argue. Every time he turned to reassure her, the zipper shifted, a soft click that echoed like a tiny judgment. Outside, the forest had grown unnaturally quiet. Not even the occasional owl, not even the whisper of pine needles. Only the subtle press of wind brushing distant branches, and the faint but unrelenting presence of the thing outside. They tried leaving the tent, stepping into the cold air, but the clearing seemed impossibly vast, darkened beyond comprehension. Each tree a monolith, each shadow stretching further than it should. They returned to the tent, sealing themselves in again, but the zipper's subtle, deliberate movement continued, as if something outside was testing their resolve, their attention, their sanity. Hours passed in a rhythm of tension, punctuated by the metallic whisper. The faint brush of air inside the tent, the nylon pulsing against their bodies, made it feel alive. Sam began to feel it beneath his skin, a creeping realization that the tent was not a barrier, not a safe space. The zipper was not just sliding, it was communicating, gauging, deciding. Leah's flashlight illuminated a small patch of nylon. She leaned forward, voice trembling. "I think it knows we're awake." Sam nodded. The logic was terrifying. They had prepared for bears, for wolves, for rain, for the cold, but nothing for attention, for a consciousness outside the tent that understood the mechanism of their defenses, that could probe, test, manipulate. The night stretched on. Sam eventually forced himself to sleep, a shallow, fragmented rest punctuated by the soft click of the zipper. Leah stayed awake, clutching the flashlight, the beam cutting through the folds of nylon, catching nothing, illuminating only the quiet press of their tiny world. Then, just before dawn, she saw it. A shape outside the tent, impossibly still, just beyond the perimeter of firelight, barely visible through the thin nylon walls. It was elongated, a silhouette that didn't match the contours of a human. The faintest curve of movement, too subtle to define, made the zipper slip forward again, as if in acknowledgement. Leah screamed, though the sound was muffled by the tent fabric. Sam woke instantly, heart pounding, hands fumbling for the flashlight. But when they shone it toward the shape, nothing was there. The clearing was empty. No figure, no movement. Only the soft click of the zipper, inching open again, despite the lock. They packed quickly, abandoning their camp, but the trail back to the car seemed altered. The trees were denser, the path narrower, the wind silent. Every snap of twig underfoot sounded unnaturally loud, and the metallic whisper from the tent lingered in their ears, echoing like a reminder. They had been observed. Even now, Sam sometimes dreams of that night. The rhythmic sliding, the soft clicks, the impression that the zipper's movement was deliberate, intelligent. That it had been deciding whether they were allowed to leave, whether they had noticed, whether they were worthy. And sometimes, in the deep silence before sleep, he swears he can feel it again. A metallic pull, a subtle resistance, as if the lock itself were testing him, waiting for him to open it from the inside.